Hey, my name is Jake Stengel. I am a photographer in San Francisco. I've made a really long video for you guys today about what kind of knowledge you need to have in order to become a photo assistant if you've never photo assisted ever before. This video was really started out of this situation I was finding myself in pretty frequently, where I would get emails from aspiring or emerging photographers that really wanted to break into the industry by photo assisting, but were never kind of given any sort of access point prior. Maybe they didn't graduate high school or college, or they didn't go to photo school in general, which is totally fine. And there was this kind of catch-22 where if you can't get on set, then you'll never have the knowledge that you need to become a photo assistant, and if you're kind of trapped on the outside, you'll never get in as a photo assistant. So this video is really meant to kind of enlighten and kind of educate folks that don't often have the resources to kind of enter this industry. It's a really weird industry, but it's a great industry at the same time. And I'm going to cover a lot of different kind of basics of what's called lighting and grip, as well as kind of what to expect from being a photo assistant, what it means, the whole gamut. So it's a really long video, so just like get really comfortable and hope you enjoy it. There's kind of two main ways. You can either reach out to photographers directly, or you can reach out to the main assistants they might work for, or if you're aware of an assistant in your community, you can reach out to that person directly as well. If you're reaching out to a photographer, it's really, really helpful to, I think, have a link to your work. I really love to see the work of a prospective assistant, and especially what their relationship they have is with light, even if it's just totally natural light, what their stylistic kind of approach is like. It's like having the same taste in music. It's better to work, I find, with someone who we kind of speak the same visual language, because if I am lighting something a certain way or shooting something, if the photo assistant is also kind of in that same mindset, it's really helpful. It also helps, I just love to see what a photo assistant's work looks like, and try to help nurture that. So that's one way, is just by reaching out to a photographer and saying, hey, I have this experience, or I have no experience, but here's my portfolio. It's not unlike a first date. You're just trying to make inroads with that person. The other thing you can do is if you can get into a network of photo assistants, it's a really, really great way to get probably a greater amount of work with a variety of photographers. If you start to show up and be an awesome assistant, word gets around really quick, even in a city as big as like New York or LA, that you're super capable, you're really attentive, you have great attitude, and before you know it, you will probably get a lot of calls, maybe like more calls than you even can handle perhaps, but word of mouth goes a really long way, and just relationships go a really long way. So don't think that this is something you can just like exist in virtually and then just like get your foot in the door. It's an industry that's full of kind of personable people. It's very, very kind of one-on-one, and how you work in kind of groups and teams. The better your reputation gets, the more work you're going to get, and it's a great way to kind of be learning a lot from other photographers, and when you're ready to move out of it, it's ultimately up to you to decide when you want to do that.
Hey everyone, my name is Collin Chappelle. I'm the photographer and videographer for global marketing at Specialized Bicycles, based in Morgan Hill, California, just south of San Jose. Been here for about 2 years now, but before that I was a working assistant, a career assistant, honestly. And by that I mean that I made about 80% of my income assisting. The rest of it was from small shooting jobs, from a portrait here or there, the odd wedding, or some editorial gigs for the local newspapers. So for the bulk of my adult life, I was working as an assistant. So I know it can definitely seem like a club that's hard to break into, the commercial photography world. But I think it's something that is very advantageous for photographers to get the opportunity to work with other shooters on bigger projects in places and in environments that you would not normally really have the access to. And you can learn so much so fast that it's probably the best education you could really find out there. So a little bit about me, just to kind of give you a little background. I started photography kind of on accident, like a lot of people. Found a camera that my parents had, like during like a cleanup session, like a little spring cleaning, and it didn't work. But I was like intrigued. I really wanted to make it work, and so I didn't fix it, not tinkering. So I just saved a bunch of money from mowing lawns and bought myself a first camera. From there, it went into working in newspapers. So I actually went to college, not for photography. I went to be a physics teacher, to believe it or not. And along the way, I started working at the college newspaper. Kind of an accident, just like learning photography in the first place. And from there, I realized I really enjoyed what I was doing. You know, like I was spending more time in the newspaper than I was studying physics, that's for sure. And I was told I should try and get an internship, which I had never thought of, but the idea that someone was going to pay me to take pictures for a summer sounded great. Long story short is I ended up working a couple of jobs as an intern, and then I ended up getting, after I graduated, a job working at a newspaper in South Carolina. That didn't last long because 2007, 2008 happened not that long after, and ended up moving to Atlanta. So when I was in Atlanta, I didn't have a job, but I definitely wanted to work as a photographer and in the photo industry, like 100%. I was like pretty committed to that. I had a 3-year-old about this time. So it was pretty important to like make money as fast as possible. So like I really just dove in. I had no idea what I was doing. No one told me what to do. Just kind of had some idea that assisting sounded like a thing that I wanted to work on. And I kind of came across it randomly, you know, like Photo Shelter and all these other websites. They sort of kept talking about assisting. One of the first things that just sort of made logical sense to me was if I want to work as an assistant, I need to figure out who might hire assistants. So kind of want to break down some of the things that I think are really, really important. I shouldn't say important, but these are what worked for me. So I'm not saying this is like the way to do it, but it is what worked for me. And it could be the first of many steps that you can take to kind of start your journey in assisting and sort of like break down that those first barriers. But the first thing was to create a list of shooters that I wanted to work for. They ranged from real estate shooters to corporate portraitists to like high-end editorial to just your sort of run-of-the-mill commercial photographer to like product studios, like literally anyone that looked like they were doing the level of work that they might hire an assistant. Those are the people that I targeted. And I think my initial list was like 75 to 100 different photographers, all within the Atlanta area. You shouldn't have any problem just searching for search terms on Google, like portrait photographer, your city, commercial photographer, your city, architectural photographer, your city, and just go from there. On that note, I just thought about this, another way to find other photographers, this is one that I used, are the professional organizations. So those are great places to go and see other shooters in your area where they have samples of their work and sort of like can list out what it is that they do well. And you could get some idea of like if their levels, the kind of work where they might hire someone to come help, like an assistant. So once I had that list, it probably took me a couple of weeks. Like it was definitely like a slog of hours of just like mind-numbing data entry, if you will. But once I got that, I spent the next week or two building out this like cold contact email. Cold contact as in like they've never heard of me before. I'm just a random person emailing them. And that's literally how it all started for me. So I sent out 75, 100 emails one day randomly. Basically, it was just, an introduction of myself as a person, my interest in photography, my background that I did have. Like luckily I had like shot some stuff and could show it. But also at the same time, if you're interested in photography, I wouldn't say that you have to like have, like examples of work to show in order to get assisting work. I think becoming an assistant is more about work ethic, drive, willingness to learn and listen, anticipate, and just generally be like a really cool person to hang around. Like, it's probably like, I would say like almost like 75% of the job. So if you have strengths that aren't necessarily photo related, like if you worked in construction, or how like you help plan parties, or something that might translate into someone who you can rely on to help you do something complicated, are all talents that assistants all have. Good assistants all have. So lean on those strengths, even if they're not photo related, and just write your little elevator pitch about why it is that you want to be an assistant and why you want to assist this person. So like, I left a little section of my little form letter where I could like insert little things about their work that I found interesting. That way it wasn't like 100% copy and paste, and that shows, I think, that little extra that I paid attention. And so I would say, don't expect to hear back from a lot of those people. I think my original hit rate was maybe like 5%, but what I would do is I would meet with those folks. We would have, I'd either like have a coffee, drop by their studio, or I think on one or two occasions I may have like popped in on a shoot. They offered me to come by and just like say hi and like meet their crew and see what's going on and just sort of like say hi, which was awesome. And those all led to like the opportunity to work and make money as an assistant. I think one of the other things that was really awesome that I realize now of how I kind of got started as well was through the local rental houses. So I would say that you should look up, where are these photographers that are videographers, cinematographers, DPs, where are they going to get their gear? Because a lot of times those folks have lists of local assistants where photographers can go and, pick up a second or a third assistant, right? So it's a great place to kind of get your name in, right? I wasn't obviously anyone with experience and wasn't on that list at all, but I realized that my local rental house in Atlanta was having like an assistants challenge day where they were like doing everything from like who could set up a roll of seamless, or break down an octabank, or set up like 10C stands and break them back down, or I don't know, all kinds of dumb little but like related assisting challenges, and they were all like for time, and they're like in a team and stuff. And I'll tell you, the hardest thing is that 4x6 collapsible reflector thing. That thing is a pain. I still have trouble with that thing. But anyway, so what was great was that there were some really like heavy hitter local assistants that were there sort of like for fun, and they destroyed all the teams of like novices. But what was great is I got to introduce myself to them, and I will say 100% that the best people for you to network for assisting jobs are other assistants. So I ended up going back and making another email for other assistants and sent that email out as well. Definitely highly suggest that as well. But as I was saying, that it's going to be like your personality and your drive that wins you the opportunity to meet people and get the chance to work. The work of an assistant, like at its core, is something that I think everyone can do. It doesn't really matter how tall, like small, strong, or fit you are. I think it has a lot to do with just who you are as a person and your willingness to learn and listen, and be willing to kind of like think ahead. I think that's one of the biggest advantages to someone who's on set. Like, while everyone else has their job and is focusing on the photography itself and dealing with clients, like you can be thinking about like everything from that trip hazard to knowing that you have to move to a new seamless color background, and thinking through how you're quickly going to make that change so that everything just stays on time. So yeah, I think that's sort of one of the things that I found were most helpful. And again, like once you finally get yourself on set, which might take a couple follow-up emails for some folks, because you'll definitely get some people who will respond right away, and I would definitely like wait a week and respond back. And if you don't hear from anyone, like maybe a month later, you hit up that list again of everyone that didn't reply, and start over again. But like once you do get yourself on a set, network on set, talk to those other assistants, talk to the stylist. And it's not about like handing out cards per se, but it's like just let them know that you're there. That was one of the things I always did, was I was always there. It's just always me. It's just me as a person. I always like to talk to people and like get to know them, and especially people off in the corner. Like, you never know who that person is and who they know. I got a lot of assisting work from a stylist. I had to work with 10, 15, 20 different photographers over the course of a year in order to, like, you know, meet ends meet. So don't be afraid to diversify, is what I'm trying to say. Reach out to anyone and everyone who might possibly need an assistant and be willing to pay for it. I will say that once you have some experience, it goes a really long way. I was actually able to move from Atlanta to San Diego, California. I was following my co-parent to go get her PhD. At this time we had 2 kids, and restart my assisting business, essentially. I literally went back to that first draft email that I sent like years before and like reorganized it and updated it with names of photographers I had worked with, like especially like really notable people, obviously, clients that we had worked with, and sort of like my experience that I had found along the way. And I was able to pick up right away working with some of the top photographers based in San Diego. There's some pretty heavy hitters down there, to be honest. So that was really awesome. Like it sort of really reinforced that like what I had started doing like years before was still valid today and was kind of a decent way to get work going. And again, like more than anything, it's just networking. The more people I met, the more people I kept in touch with. Keep all your call sheets, which are the pieces of paper or PDFs that you'll get in the email that has like literally every person that's going to be on set listed out with their title, email, and phone number. Don't abuse all that information, but at the same time, like, it's super awesome. It's literally how I got my job that I have now, because I worked on a job assisting, and the person who was there from Specialized remembered our conversation and thought that I might be interested in a position here. And we had not talked since that day. And 8 or 9 months later, he sends me an email telling me that I should apply for this job because he still had my contact info from the call sheet. We didn't. So don't be afraid to reach out to as many people as possible. Don't be afraid to lean on your strengths, even if they're not photo related, and just be honest and just be a cool person to hang out with. Actually, someone told me once that they didn't hire a certain photographer, a certain assistant. I always remember this. They didn't hire a certain assistant for this job because it involved like a 6-hour road trip, and they just couldn't imagine themselves sitting in a car for 6 hours with this person. So like I said, like, it's super important just to be someone cool to hang out around with, and that'll get you a lot of work, to be honest. So that's it for me. Hopefully that kind of ramble strikes a chord in some way, and kind of helps continue to keep that fire lit for you to keep driving forward on becoming an assistant and eventually a photographer, right? Like, you know, all assistants sort of shoot on the side to some degree, I would think, and it doesn't mean you have to stop being a photographer, that's for sure. If anything, it'll help you be a better photographer, hands down. So again, if you guys have any questions or anything, happy to chat. Talk your ear off just like I did right now. Cheers.
All right, sorry, I'm very handheld here. This is what a photo studio looks like. I'm in Flash Studios in South San Francisco. It's a awesome little spot down here. This huge thing here is called a cyc, C-Y-C. As you can tell, it's got kind of no edge, and so that's designed so that once you're shooting here, this camera will not be able to focus on anything. You have a full white background, so you have no kind of crazy lip where the floor hits the wall, which is super helpful when you're shooting any sort of person usually. Here's my little setup that I've been recording in. This is called generally it's called a Magliner. It's where the digital tech, who's the person who's kind of inputting all the files that you're shooting via a tether cord. So you're not shooting to card, you're not shooting to a memory card, but you're shooting straight into the computer. So that's usually their station. Clients hang out here and check their social media. Also another great place to check out your social media, maybe take a selfie. And again, this is during COVID, so no one's here. And then I'm going to show you one thing. So this is where I'm going to talk about later, but where all the diffusion, nets, silks, V-flats, etc. live. So I won't go to the back because I don't want to give away too much. This is where hair and makeup goes. I won't even show you myself. Hi. So yeah, that's what one example of a photo studio looks like.
Okay, so hi, I'm Lauren. I assisted for about 4 years before transitioning into shooting full-time, and I've got a few things to share with you that I hope help in your journey. I'm mostly talking to women here, but honestly this stuff applies to everybody, so yeah. I got started working for one photographer, and he got signed by a rep pretty quickly after that. So I in turn started working for her as well. She ended up putting me on jobs for other photographers on her roster. So I got a really good idea of working with other lighting styles and different techniques. And that was super valuable to be around a variety of stuff. A different kind of starting point might be to reach out to reps and let them know you're interested in learning, that you're a hard worker and will do whatever you can to get on set. Getting your foot in the door is really the most important and hardest part of all of this. But even asking to PA for them is a really great entry and something you don't need any background or formal education for. And if you're enthusiastic, like, people will be stoked, and that's great. So for women specifically, a little tough love here, but the reality is that you need some muscle to assist, and all jobs are different. It definitely doesn't apply to everything, but most of the time you're just gonna have to move a little bit faster and hustle a little bit harder than your male counterparts, and that sucks, but it's the truth. You get really strong when you assist, so that's great, but just keep that in mind. Another thing, if possible, don't put up with sexist bullshit on set. Try not to let comments slide. Give the producer a heads up, and in my experience, most of the people saying dumb shit don't really have any power anyways. And if the producer is a decent human, that person will not be on the next job. If it's the photographer or the client, on the other hand, you're kind of shit out of luck. I can't sugarcoat it. Sets are really all about hierarchy and power dynamics, and just like any other industry where that's present, you're gonna hear shit. But overall, it does feel like this is changing and getting better, but it's still there. So to find assisting work, reach out to female photographers and producers. They want you on set. I'd rather have a woman assisting me 100% of the time. The less dudes are on set, just the less ego is on set, and it's a more all-around pleasant experience for everyone involved. I mean, it doesn't apply to everybody, of course, but just something I've noticed over the years in general. If you can, try and get work as a second or third assistant when you're just starting out, and absorb as much as you can from the first and the second. Ask them to explain everything they are doing and why they are doing it, and don't be afraid of asking questions. In my experience, they'll respect that and love that you have initiative, and that you want to learn. They'll think that's great, and they'll be really supportive and even go above and beyond to help you learn stuff and figure stuff out. Just kind of a general thing. Don't be intimidated when it seems like everyone else has super fancy equipment. If you have a vision, you're gonna be able to make it work, and don't let not having the right thing get in the way of that. With that said though, always keep an eye on the used section of B&H for more affordable gear. They test and inspect everything, and you can trust them, and they're a really great resource. Going forward to shooting, don't stop shooting even if your schedule is full of assisting work. You're only gonna become a better photographer over time, and that includes your editing style. You just gotta keep doing it constantly. If your goal is to shoot, don't let assisting work become a barrier to that. If you notice that it's become a time suck for you and you want to move on, which you don't have to do, you can assist forever, and that's awesome. But you have to transition somehow if you don't want to do it forever. I actually told all the producers I was working with at the time to stop hiring me as an assistant, which was super scary financially and like in general, but it forced me out of it. Like for a while I used different skills I learned on sets over time, and I prof styled for a while. If you pay attention to everything going on around you, you'll learn everything from the people around you, so you can pick up different skills and kind of use those in the interim as well. It was like honestly kind of a thing where like it became clear that I wasn't a photo assistant anymore, and not only to like people I was working for, but mostly just to myself. It was like more of a symbol than anything, but still really important. Another thing, get paid. A legit photographer who's going to actually be valuable to learn from is going to pay you to work for them always. Even if they're doing a test and they're not getting paid, they'll recognize the value of your time because they've been there. Don't let yourself get taken advantage of. Even if it's like a small editorial thing, talk about an hourly rate before you show up to the job. It might take a few hours. You might get lunch and $20 an hour out of it, but it's, you know, it's your time, so don't waste it. The last thing, just basically make yourself available. Annoy people within reason with your enthusiasm, and once you get your foot in the door, you end up meeting all sorts of people that you're going to grow with. Like the stylist assistants that you build bonds with come up at the same pace that you do. Like test with them, make connections with them, and eventually it'll work out. It will. It's hard. It's really hard, but just keep shooting, keep taking pictures. That's all. Okay, bye.
Hi, my name is Rivera, and I'm a photographer based in Brooklyn, New York, and I have actually never been an assistant. So in a lot of ways, I feel like I've entered this industry backwards, or taken an unconventional route to get to where I'm at. And, you know, I wish that there was a resource like this when I was super young trying to get into photography. I had no idea what that meant or had any concept of, you know, who was working and what was happening. And so I went to an art school. I was always really dead set on studying photography. And so I did end up getting my bachelor's in fine arts at the Rhode Island School of Design. What was never emphasized, I think, in my education was, you know, how to develop a career in photography. I had no idea. I had no concept of assisting or, you know, what kind of money you could make doing this. All of the examples that I'd had as moving into this sort of professional space out of college were fine art. You know, you could make a body of work and get yourself into a gallery and sell work, which seemed, you know, really hard to do and be able to make money as a 21-year-old coming out of college. It didn't feel like that was attainable at the time, or it felt like a much longer what was in between that. I feel like you had to do something in between to get to that point. Nobody ever really talked about assisting. Nobody ever talked about freelance, really. It was just never addressed in my school experience. And so the first thing that came to my mind was advertising, because I was like, well, I'm a photographer, that seems creative, so I'm gonna just kind of blindly apply to like 20 ad agencies. I only got a call back from one agency, which was Wieden & Kennedy. And I didn't know who they were when they emailed me. I was like, I had to look it up again because I had applied to like 25 places. So I just kind of just kept it open. And when they reached out, they were inquiring about the internship program. And so I looked them up and I was like, oh, duh, Nike, Old Spice, P&G, like I knew the work. And I think landing in the art production department was really the best place that I could have been. And I had no idea. And all of these women, they just took me under their wing and were so willing to teach me and enlighten me to, you know, this world that I really had no concept of. And, you know, I started coordinating and kind of learning how to communicate with people over email and kind of helping them get things organized. I was setting up portfolio meetings. Photographers would come in, agents would come in and do portfolio shows, and photographers would just come in and do one-on-ones with us and kind of walk us through their work. And so I started to learn how these sort of systems were put into place. And I would meet people and be like, wow, I love your work. Like, how did you do this? Or I would just ask a bunch of questions. I was so curious. And I just didn't know that this was, that all of these things were possible and that people got paid a lot of money to do it. And I would look at people's books all day long and, you know, then go on their websites and just kind of like gush over them and be like, I want to be like this. I feel like I have this in me. And, you know, it was my job to make mood boards. So I was starting to figure out from a research perspective, like who was doing what and where and why and you know, how can you talk about it? And I just like developed this Rolodex of information in my head of like who I could reference for things. And I think in a lot of ways that has really defined my own style, because I would figure out what I liked, what I didn't like, and why. And so from learning from all of these ladies about production, I was like, I felt like I had a really good base of knowledge about really the stuff that nobody teaches young photographers is like how to price your work, what do certain licenses cost for, you know, out of home. I didn't know what that term was, out of home, digital, web, print, whatever. All of those things are super important to know, especially in pricing your work and what your value is. And without that, I don't think I would have known left from right when I went freelance. And so I sort of found myself in this place where I had access to these things and this information, these resources, without having ever assisted on a job. It's always been a kind of a point of insecurity for me, because I feel like it's a rite of passage. It's something that a lot of people do, and it's one of the main routes that you can take to break into this industry and become, you know, a photographer. So little by little, I was shooting little like social content. This is really when Instagram started to take off, and we were shooting things for clients in-house, and everybody knew that I was a photographer and I was interested in it. And so they were giving me little bits here and there, and I got better and better and better. And I was going in on the weekends, and I was working in the lighting studio, just practicing. Like I took a lighting class on the side that they helped me pay for, and because I hadn't taken lighting in college. And so I was learning just the language of strobe lighting and continuous light, just kind of learning the basics, and going into the office on the weekends and just shooting with people that I would find on Instagram or friends, and we would just kind of like make stuff up. I think eventually, largely in part to do with Instagram, I was posting a lot. I was sort of like interested in developing a consistency, and I would meet agents that would follow me on Instagram, and I would meet other producers that would follow me on Instagram. And I was like, all of a sudden, getting jobs on the side. I was freelancing like while I was full-time still. And I was like, okay, I could do this. Like, I don't know. I'm gonna try. I ended up, as I was kind of evolving in my role there, I started as an intern, I was production coordinator. I worked my way up to lead image researcher. You know, and I started shooting on the side, and I was freelancing on the weekends and kind of navigating things on my own from what I was learning at Wyden. In so many ways, I have them to thank for my launch into this whole world, because they've taught me really everything that I know. I ended up getting an opportunity from a friend of mine who was working at Adidas that knew my work, and we're the same age, and he was working in music, and he was like, hey, I have this opportunity to go on tour with a musician, like, would you be interested? And I was like, yeah, but I need to figure out what I'm gonna do about my full-time job. And so I sort of proposed a leave of absence for me to go do this tour, get this experience, and kind of have a taste of freelance, essentially, but also shooting in a way that I was never exposed to or really thought that I was capable of. And because I also had relationships with other agencies, like photo agencies, I reached out and was like, hey, you know, can I pick your brain about, you know, how to negotiate and, you know, what I can do to improve my work and really become attractive to clients like this. And so I started talking to my now agents at Giant, and Jen Jenkins really like took me under her wing and guided me through this process of, you know, transitioning from this full-time job, where I had an extremely huge safety net, to the abyss of freelance. And I went down to LA and I showed her my work, and she kind of helped me get an edit together and was just giving me advice like throughout my time touring. And I ended up, you know, I was like 2 weeks into the tour, and I was like, oh, I could do this. Like, I can freelance. I don't need the job. I can figure it out. And at the time, I really wanted to move to New York. I was living in Portland, Oregon. And so I was like, here's my window. Like, I have to take this opportunity. So I finished the tour. It was like 3 months, and I came back to work and quit maybe 2 days in. And they were super supportive about it. I was just like, I want to move to New York, and I want to, I really want to figure out how to freelance, and I'm just gonna go for it. And so a month later, I was out of my apartment, closed my lease, sold all my things, and moved to New York. And I was touring a little bit on and off, and I was just kind of subletting around or couch surfing with friends. I had no idea, you know, what I was gonna do. I had like a loose plan, and I started getting jobs. And I think it was partly to do with work that I had done, kind of like I would do trade and favors for people, and I was shooting stuff just because I wanted to get a portfolio built so that people would hire me. And I got one job that led to another job that led to another, and I've been doing this for almost 3 years now, and I just got signed, and I am now a fully working professional photographer, and I've never been an assistant. I really haven't met a lot of people that have come in the way that I have, And I feel very fortunate, but I don't think that having an education in photography is a make or break. I think that if you're fortunate enough to be able to go to school for it or for any medium, amazing, that's great. If not, it's not going to necessarily take away from you being able to get into this. I think if you have an eye and you have a passion for it and a work ethic, you can do it. Hopefully in listening to my story, you can carve out your own path, however you see it working for you. So good luck.
Basic do's and don'ts of assisting. I'm going to start with the positive. I'm going to start with the what to do as an assistant. I think one of the most important things is to be on time. This is an industry, for better or worse, where timeliness is imperative. It's being late is not cool. It's not. It shows you don't respect other people's time, which is kind of how I feel about just like life in general. I used to work for someone who said that early is on time and on time is late. I don't really think you need to go quite that far, but the last thing you want to do, just think of assisting, you're part of a team, you're a team player. The last thing you want to do is hold any part of this process up by being late yourself. If what's called call time, which is the time that you are meant to arrive on set, is say 7 a.m., don't risk it. Don't try to get there at 6:59. Get there at like 6:40 and just sit and just relax. Like the last thing you want to do is show up late and then say you get there at 7:20 and half of the equipment is loaded into a location. That's a really poor reflection of you and your kind of commitment to helping out this crew that you're part of. Don't leave traffic to chance. Don't leave anything to chance whatsoever. I know it sounds like super type A and just kind of crazy, but just drill it into your head that timeliness is really important, and to just make sure you're either on time or a little bit early, and just one thing is done. It's just huge. All right, so what to do on set, especially if this is maybe one of your first times on set. I'm just gonna work with a situation where you're on location. Although it can really be for anything. I think just attentiveness and anticipation of what might happen are two of the biggest qualities that you can, most important and most kind of desired qualities as a photo assistant is just constantly be looking around and thinking about what could be done in that moment and what might happen in the future and what you might need to address now so it doesn't happen in the future. So say I'm going to talk about strobe packs later on with batteries. One amazing thing is just to do a quick walk around every once in a while and just look at the indicator of the battery level and just see if a battery is almost low. When there's a break, change that battery out. Don't wait until a battery is dead and the whole shoot has to stop because you maybe weren't paying attention or what have you. So I understand it's a little bit hard when this video is really meant as an introduction to assisting, but stay off your phone. That's one huge thing. The more you're off your phone and not looking down, the more you can be observant of what's happening out in front of you. Just try to be a good team player. Try to look out for what might need to get done. If you see even someone that's not on your team, like say, could be anyone. It could be the caterer, whatever. If someone needs a hand, give them a hand. It honestly helps so much with the smoothness of the shoot. It helps so much with just the overall kind of vibe of the shoot. If everyone's looking to, watching out for each other and making the day kind of as best as possible. All right, there's actually not too many don'ts, and I've somewhat addressed them in the do's. Again, don't be late. It's just not a good look whatsoever. It shows you already are not kind of anticipating the day. You maybe just didn't anticipate traffic, you didn't anticipate your alarm not going off, whatever. Be on time, don't be late. Really huge. The other thing is just, again, try to really not be on your phone. I know it's so tempting in those kind of down moments, but just take it as an exercise in just pretending it's like 1993 all over again, and you don't have that option to kind of automatically go check Instagram, whatever. It will pay off in spades, not only in terms of how you look on set, but I'm sure you're going to observe something that you would have not noticed otherwise if you had been on your phone. The last thing really is just to try to be somewhat selfless on set. Just again, look out for one another. Don't make a little like clique around your photo crew. Don't be afraid to talk to other people. And just try to make it a really enjoyable, relaxing day for you, because that kind of energy will start to, feed off on everyone else. All right, in terms of kind of hierarchy or just different people's roles, it's so case by case in terms of the photographer, their relationship with, say the first assistant, if there is kind of a multitude of different assistants. If it's a smaller crew, like say a photographer and say 2 assistants, generally the photographer will kind of be giving direction to the first and then impart the second. If not always though, everyone's kind of different. Oftentimes on a bigger commercial set, commercial being for advertising, often on a commercial set, like a commercial set for say advertising of some sort, the photographer, there's just a lot going on, and the first assistant, especially if they have a really great relationship and they've been working together for a while, the first assistant will kind of be the person that's telling the rest of the photo crew being all the photo assistants and maybe even the digital tech, kind of different instructions. They are kind of the first assistant in those scenarios, can be kind of the band leader for that realm of lighting and kind of getting ready for the next shot, etc. So try to, on a bigger set, look to someone kind of slightly more senior, although I kind of hate that word, but maybe the first assistant. If it's a smaller set, like for a magazine, really just like look for any sort of instruction from the photographer. Sometimes the photographer can be really flustered. Sometimes the photographer is not very good at being a leader or saying kind of what is on their mind, or they can't kind of, get ready for the next shot. It's by no means is it on you to kind of anticipate what, you're not a mind reader. It's not how this works. The best thing you can do is kind of keep the gear organized and have things kind of at the ready. When I was assisting, oftentimes I was just kind of, it's like moving into a house and then moving out of a house. You're getting a lot of equipment set up. You might use 20% of it, but if you're called on for any other part of the 80%, it's ready. You're not caught flat-footed. So if you're not getting a lot of direction from a first assistant or a photographer, just try to think about what you can be proactively doing so that everything's ready to go, and you're not kind of the person people are waiting on to get going. The grip equipment, which is like clamps, it's stands, is anything kind of rigging in order to get your lights set up. But before I really talk about lighting in general, which I'm going to get into strobes in particular, I just want to stress, even though I've gone through a lot of different equipment, all these different very, very expensive things, by no means do you need to use them. You can make incredible work with available light in whatever that form might be. It might be a really rainy day, it might be a really sunny day, it might be illuminated by like one bulb in a basement, it could be in a club, it could be anything. So just know that you do not need any of this equipment that I'm showing you to make your own work. I want to kind of separate that idea out. What I'm showing you in terms of equipment is things you might see on set that are helpful to know, but by no means do you need this equipment to make your own work. They're two very, very different things. Also, a lot of the things that I'm going to show you are easily you can replicate them at home with different household items. So I'm going to show you things like a bounce board, and you can use like a bathroom mirror instead. I'm going to show you a thing called a softbox, and you can use a bed sheet in a window, or even like a set of blinds. I've used even like colored glasses to shoot light through. So know that even though we're in a very nice spendy studio, it's beyond top tier. So thank you, Flash, for allowing me to be here. By no means do you need this equipment to make your own work. It's helpful kind of in a more professional context, but you can do anything I'm showing you and more at home if you just have some kind of ingenuity. It's more about, I would say, your key to success is understanding the way light works. And once you have that kind of fundamental knowledge of how light works and how you observe it and how you want to kind of replicate it, the sky is the limit in terms of the equipment you can use, whether it's like $10,000 or $10. The other thing I'll mention is try to really frame this in terms of I'm showing you tools to make whatever work you want. I have my own interpretation of light, so does the next person, so does the next person. What I'm showing you and maybe anything I'm saying about how I use light is just how I use light. It's not how other photographers use light. It's, the parallels to music are incredibly, similar. Think of what I'm doing today as I'm teaching you chords on guitar, but I'm not teaching you how to make a song with those chords. That's fully up to you. It's a lot about your own interpretation of how you want to use these tools, if at all. And again, there's no one like wrong or right way to use any of the things I'm showing you. It's all about what you make of them. So just don't conflate what I'm showing you in terms of how I use a softbox to how you might use a softbox. So it's just very important to know that these are tools, but it's up to you to make your own music, basically. The other thing I'll mention is I'm constantly in my day-to-day life, not in a studio, but just as I move about. It could be indoors, it could be outdoors. I'm always kind of taking note of the way light works. Right now, right behind this camera, there's it's kind of a cloudy day outside. There's beautiful, soft, kind of cloudy light coming through a window, and it's making a beautiful highlight on a metal object right behind me. So it could be that, it could be, like the way you maybe walk into a room kind of in the late afternoon, there's like sunlight streaming through the window and making a beautiful kind of highlight on the floor. The more you start to really, really consciously observe like what I would just call like awesome light, that's happening naturally. It could be, it could be a red light outside, like someone's window, inside it, the way something is casting a shadow. Try to start to make like a Rolodex of all these moments you're seeing that have really incredible light, whether it's like really dim, really bright, really, really hard kind of contrasty light, really soft light. And the more you have an understanding of the potential of light and how to start to bend and shape it and mold it to what you want, the more you'll be able to kind of replicate that with artificial light on a shoot. So I would really, really recommend just being really observant of little beautiful lighting moments around you, and then also understanding what is making physically how they're happening. Is there a really, really kind of small window that's making a really focused pool of light? Is it a really cool neon light that's then reflecting in a puddle of water? The more you can start to take notice of these things, the more of a kind of comprehension you'll have of how to make them happen in your own work. All right, so I'm here at Flash Studios in South San Francisco. They have been very, very kind in letting me come in and show you guys the lighting and grip portion of this. What I will go over today is basically some relatively basic grip equipment you might see on set on either an editorial or commercial shoot. And basically this is not meant to be an extremely comprehensive look. This is just so that if someone asks you to get a C-stand or something of that sort, you know what is being asked of you. So, and also just to clarify, grip, if you hear lighting and grip, it usually is kind of referred to in the same bundle. Lighting is referring to lights, which can be strobes or continuous lights, which I'll talk about shortly, but grip basically means any sort of rigging or support for the light itself. So it could be things like the C-stand, it can be clamps, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but I'm just gonna go through a variety of different lighting, sorry, not lighting, but just grip you might see on set. So this is a C-stand. It's probably the most common item of grip you'll see on set. It's basically a stand that you can put lights on. If I back up, I'm also standing on what's called a cyc, which is like a big white swoopy thing. Looks like kind of a bit of a half a pipe of sorts. So in order to open a C-stand, there's different kind of types. This one is spring-loaded. What I like to do, and everyone's very different, so if you don't do it this way, don't get mad. There's no one correct way. I like to put it on my foot. Just watch your foot. This way, if you're on like a floor that's kind of fragile or something, you don't scratch it. And you basically just rotate it once, rotate it twice, and you flip it back like that, and that's a C-stand. The next part of a C-stand that I'll talk about, which is actually kind of its own thing, is what's called an arm. So this whole thing right here, if you give me a moment. So this is an arm. This usually goes with a C-stand. You can use a C-stand and put a light on just this stand itself. The light will attach right here. Usually these come with an arm. This is called a knuckle, if you can see that. I feel like I'm Julia Child right now. So basically the arm, if you can see this, goes through the knuckle. There's a couple different holes for different types of rigging. So make sure that this arm goes through this hole and you slide it in. And the way this knuckle works is it has two kind of self-tightening elements to it. So there's one on this side, it's pretty simple. And then there's this one. So this one here is what attaches onto your C-stand, and this tightens. And you can always check and make sure things are tight by just verifying. Usually things are gonna rotate a little bit. You don't wanna over tighten anything because you're gonna probably break it. But that's what a C-stand is. The next thing, I guess the other point to a C-stand is how you tighten if you have a light on here, how that works. So I'm gonna put a light on here, be right back. Okay, we're back. There's a train next to me. One thing I forgot to mention about C-stands is and just a lot of stands in general, there are these things here called risers. It's basically the amount of extension you have on each stand. So this is I guess most C-stands are a 2-riser C-stand. So when you put a light on a stand of any sort, this is your thing called the knuckle here. When you mount a light on a C-stand with an arm, which is this thing, this is a strobe light. Sorry, I haven't been going to the gym. So I'm gonna talk about strobes in a minute, but basically with any arm, you mount it on and make sure that everything's tight. You do not want a light falling off the stand whatsoever. So now this is tight, you can always kind of check and verify. And the biggest thing I think with C-stands to know is that when you have a light or anything heavy, I'm doing this in reverse as well, everything's modular, everything's kind of angled. But when you have anything heavy, make sure, I'm doing this in reverse as well, make sure that this knuckle is oriented clockwise. And the reason you want to do that is if the light is super, super heavy, I'm going to loosen this a little, and starts to fall, look at this knuckle. It's going to basically self-tighten. Just imagine it self-tightened. That way it's kind of insurance. If you have it the other way, like so, and your light starts to fall, the knuckle is going to, just imagine, is going to eventually loosen and the light's going to fall. So just make sure that when you're setting up a C-stand with any sort of light or anything heavy on it, that you're looking at it and just make sure that this knuckle is going to self-tighten. Okay, so now that we have talked about C-stands, I'm going to talk next about some clamps that you might see. Clamps are basically anything like this. This is going to for sure be the most commonly kind of referenced clamp. It's called a super clamp. It's also sometimes occasionally called a Mayfair clamp. To be honest, I have no idea why. It's got all sorts of different ways to attach to stands. The most common way you'll see, and again, you'll see there's really no, often, unless you've been working for like a gajillion years, there's no elegant way to sometimes do all this in terms of rigging. Don't feel like you need to be like a super duper pro. It takes me sometimes a long time to figure out how to put a clamp onto a stand. It's gonna be fine. So for this, basically there's this little tiny pin, I'm trying to focus here. It pinches like so. So this clamp won't go on otherwise. In order to put this super clamp on, you have to pinch this pin, then it'll go down, and then use this to tighten like so. So now the super clamp is on here, you can put fingers in here, you can really rig it in any sort of way, but it's basically an incredibly tight and dependable way to rig all sorts of different things. Another thing that you'll often see with super clamps is you'll rig, sorry, this is really awkward. And I'm just all up in the way. You can also rig a super clamp straight onto a pole, a stand, like so. Okay, this is going nowhere whatsoever. It's super, super tight. From here, you can also take what's called a J hook. This is a J hook. It looks like a J. And you can put your J hook in here, and just like before with the super clamp, you have to push this little pin down, pop it in, and then tighten like so. J-hooks are really helpful. Sometimes people love to put packs, like strobe packs on them, sandbags, etc. They're just a really, really helpful tool. So that is a J-hook and a super clamp. Next we have my favorite, which is a platypus clamp. It's pretty much exactly like what it says. They're really, really great for holding V-flats in place. I'm going to talk about V-flats in a second, but they're basically huge pieces of foam core. They're awesome for bouncing, anything like that. So they have this kind of adjustment mechanisms, all sorts. This will adjust like how tight or loose this is. I've made it really, really tight. If you want to make it looser, you can see it's expanding. You can clamp down. In order to rig a platypus clamp on a C-stand, you need a knuckle of some sort. It's a plane, so we'll be right back. Okay, the plane's gone. So this is a platypus clamp. I've already explained what it is. To rig this, and I'm doing this, it's gonna take a second, but I just wanna show you, sometimes things do not happen really quickly overnight. So this can't attach. There's no way for it to attach whatsoever. If I want to rig this platypus clamp, I have to turn this arm around. So I'm gonna do that, like so. Okay, so now I have this, I guess it's also kind of a knuckle. It's at the end of this arm. Again, like, just like all photography, there's like no one right way to do it. So with this knuckle, which I will call it, you're gonna mount this onto here, tighten like so. If you need to rotate it, you can do so this way. Just everything is kind of, just imagine it's like this crazy magic arm where you can just make it do whatever you want. Let's see, the only other things I have left are, this is called a Cardellini clamp. Again, this is on a super, super, super threaded thing. It's great for if you need to maybe rig something on this end, but this is called a Cardellini clamp. It's a great little kind of intermediary. Lastly, this is called a lollipop. You can kind of tell why. I wouldn't lick it. This is kind of meant for bigger stands, which I'll touch upon in a second, but if someone asks for a lollipop, that's what they're asking for. Okay, so this is what's called a riser stand. There's different kind of heights to riser stands. This is a 2 riser stand. They're really heavy. Make sure you don't put one on your toes by accident. Sorry, this is a 3 riser, 1, 2, 3. There's also such thing as 2 risers. Generally, what you want to do sorry, this is very loud as well. When you're putting up a stand, if you don't need the full height, you want to use the lower, more stable part. So if I say need 2 out of 3 risers, I would put this one up, and then this one up, like so. So try to start from the bottom. They're more stable. It's kind of the thicker part of the riser. So watch out for that. Just a good stability tip. The biggest thing you want to do on set is just make sure you're being kind of safe. Make sure you're putting stuff up in a way that it's structurally sound. If something looks sketchy, it will probably fall. It won't make you look good or the photographer look good. It might hurt someone. So make sure to always make sure things are stable. When putting a riser stand on the ground, it has these points. I am really far away. So it goes like this. In order to open it, there's a little arm here. Again, make sure that your fingers are out of the way. And just open it like so. This riser is on wheels, so it's kind of a great way to move things around. The last thing I will talk about with risers is the different kind of ways you can put grip on top of it. So risers have this kind of top. You have 2 options. You have what you see on a C-stand, which is this little guy. And in order for you to raise or lower it, it's spring-loaded, like so. So if you want it, you just pop it up, close it. If you don't want it, you can pop it down, pop, and lock it. Then, yes, I did do that. This is the lollipop, which you might remember from earlier. You can put this in and tighten that down. This is also, now you have all these different ways to put all sorts of grip on. You could put a platypus on here. You could put a light on here. You could do whatever you want. So the last things I'll talk about here, just basic grip. This is called a stinger. It's basically a really, really nice extension cord. So if someone asks for a stinger, they're talking about this. Usually it comes in 25-foot or 50-foot lengths. This, I think, is a 25-foot stinger. Super basic. Again, thank you to Flash for having me here and accommodating my requests. This is a sandbag. It's pretty heavy. Another very important thing, always put, if you have anything heavy on a stand, a C-stand, even a riser, put sand on it. So if someone says throw some sand on that stand or on that light, they're saying take a sandbag and literally put the sandbag on the light, like so. That way, if the light starts to get really heavy with strobes or modifiers, it's as stable as possible. You can put multiple sandbags on a stand. There's really, you don't need to go overboard, but it's really, if you have extra sand lying around, just put it on a stand if it feels like it's the right thing to do. All right, and the last thing I forgot to talk about is a magliner. This is one sort of magliner. Often it's basically a magliner. It's like what you would see a delivery person have as well. They're a great way to put all sorts of lighting, grip, heavy things on a moving cart. Usually the magliners I would work with on set have a different, like one more shelf right here, so you can put kind of lighter weight stuff on and then heavier weight stuff on the bottom. So if you ask for a magliner, this is what, or if you're asked for one, this is what you'd get. Often the magliners have a shelf as well. Okay, so the last piece of grip I will be talking about today, if you even want to call it grip, I guess it is. I think it's honestly the most important thing you can have on set, maybe. It's my favorite piece of equipment. It's mostly because it's so simple. It's called an apple box. It's incredibly helpful. It's great to sit on. It's awesome to stand on. It's helpful to level things out. So there's 4 types of apple boxes. This is called a full apple box. Looks like so. In crazy kind of set vernacular, there's a couple different ways to put the apple box down. You can do it this way, or this way. I don't understand why. Apparently this is New York, so if someone says put it down New York style, that's what they mean. I feel like this is more Chicago. However, Chicago is that way. You can also do like leg lifts if you want. And the last way is LA. I'm not sure if that's in frame, but LA is flat. So LA, Chicago, New York. So that said, there's also 3 other types of apple boxes, different sizes. This is the next step up. Here, I'll do it for context. So I'm sitting on the full. You have these 3 as well. This is called a pancake. I almost never use these. They're great if you're in a muddy field. You can put stand legs on here or kind of shim things. The next is a quarter. It gets easier now. Quarter apple box. I don't really use these a lot. They're helpful to have. But if someone asks for a quarter, that's what it looks like. This is a half. I do use these often. You know, sometimes you need just an extra little bit of height or something, or someone needs to get a little taller. These are really great if you have people sitting and you need kind of different heights. If someone's a little bit taller, you can, you know, if you're shooting from here up, you can make something kind of even out. So that's what an apple box is. They're amazing. To be honest, it's like the first thing I would buy. If you're looking to buy gear, you'll find it indispensable. So as a quick recap, I'm sitting on a full apple box, quarter apple box, sorry, half apple box, quarter apple box. There's a pancake over there, you can't even see it. Stinger, extension cord basically. Platypus clamp, great for V-flats, which I'll talk about shortly. Cardellini clamp. I don't know, there's probably someone named Cardellini. Super clamp, or also known as a Mayfer clamp, and a J-hook. C-stand, arm with the knuckle. And again, if you're putting a light on here, in your orientation, not mine, put the heavy end so that it's going clockwise, so that it self-tightens. Righty-tighty, lefty-loosey.
Hi, I'm Terence Patrick, and I'm a photographer here in Los Angeles, and I was a photo assistant for a very long time. I wanted to give you a few tips on an important subject, and that's money. If you're a brand new photo assistant and you're looking for your first gigs, what should you expect in terms of pay? Well, chances are it's probably going to be not much. Most likely, it's going to be free, and that's the sad reality of this industry. many on the hiring end will tell you that getting experience is more important than getting paid in the beginning. And to some extent, there's truth to that. However, I think it could be beneficial to find somebody who is doing the honorable thing and will pay you even just to learn. The moment you pick up a bag, carry a stand, put something away in the truck, you're an assistant. And I think that's when it's time to get paid. Just know that labor laws are on your side, but enforcement of those laws is difficult. It's really up to you to not let the fear of losing out on work get in the way of doing the right thing and protecting yourself. It's in your best interest to look out for those photographers who are doing the right thing and paying new assistants, even if it's minimum wage, if it's $150, whatever it is. Those photographers will most likely treat you better in the long run anyway. So the typical tiers of rates as a photo assistant in the United States is about $500 for the first assistants, $250 to $350 for the second and third assistants, and for anybody below that, $250, maybe $100, sometimes free. You should typically expect to work about 10 hours a day on a photo shoot. Anything more than 10 hours typically requires overtime, and overtime is time and a half if you take your rate divided by 10 and then take that hourly amount and multiply by 1.5. You should expect to collect your money as soon as the shoot's over to as much as 30 days after you turn in your invoice. I've gotten the habit when I was a photo assistant of bringing a square reader and trying to ask the producer or ask the photographer if they'd be interested in paying me on the day. I'd bring a copy of my invoice so that they'd be good to go. I think nowadays there's Venmo, there's Zelle, PayPal, there's still square readers. Try to make it as easy for the photographer as you can while also not being annoying about it. Just, let the offer come in discreetly and see if they take it. If you don't get paid within 30 days, send a follow-up reminder, usually on the 31st day. Remind the photographer or the producer, you haven't gotten paid yet. Can you check in on this invoice? Just be nice, be casual about it. Everybody forgets things at times. We all get busy. Sometimes you'll get resolved right away. Other times, it might take a few extra nudges. And the key is being tactful, polite, and just make it gentle reminders. I have had to go as long as 90 days sometimes trying to collect invoices. And I would always try to be as sincere and thankful for the job as I could be. But in my mind, I knew that I just wasn't going to work for these people again. And hopefully if I can collect that money, that'll be the end of it. Sometimes people I worked with a lot would just forget, or they didn't have the money, or their accounting was such that they paid the assistants after they got paid on their job. And sometimes I would have to think twice before I worked for those people again. So how should you organize your invoices? When I was an assistant, I used a system called FreshBooks, and I'll show you this is an example of one of my invoices from back in my assisting days. It showed that my rate at the time was, let's see here, $500, and I worked for 6 days on this job, and I got paid $3,000. And if I remember correctly, this photographer paid me on the spot because I had FreshBooks as a digital invoicing system, and you can send a payment link directly in the body of the email. And this photographer who I worked with many times saw the payment link, hit pay, and paid me on the spot. And I think the key is sending the invoices in on time or early and making it as easy for the photographer or the producer to pay you. A lot of times you can sell it as if you get paid with credit card, they can collect points, they can get their benefits from their credit card, and it also just saves them paperwork later for writing checks, whatever. Some people have an accounting system and they've got to stick to it. They've got to send it through some payment processor or whatever the case is, and then you got to wait for a check. But having a system like FreshBooks, now as a photographer I use QuickBooks because that manages other things. That allows you as the photo assistant to keep track of what invoices are outstanding, how long they've been outstanding for, and some of them, like FreshBooks, I'm not endorsed by them anyway, I just really like them. They would automatically in the background, if the invoice wasn't paid, it'll send your client an automated email just reminding them that this particular invoice is overdue. On these sites like FreshBooks, it'll actually show you if the client clicked on the invoice, if they've seen it. And I think that's a great way of keeping your clients accountable and seeing which ones are responsive to you, which ones handle their business in such a way that it makes your job easier to assist them. To be honest, I always really enjoyed working for the people that, one, I learned something from, and two, handled their business quickly and didn't really lag in terms of paying me, paying the digital tech. I found that those people, aside from learning technical craft, I learned business craft. So for my assistants now, when I have people working for me, I try to pay as quickly as I can. And like I said, sometimes I've forgotten things or an invoice, I missed it in the email or whatever, but as soon as somebody reminds me, pay it right on the spot. But let's say things are starting to get out of hand and you're not getting paid and it's past 60 days, past 90 days, it's a really long time. What can you do as a photo assistant? Well, typically, depending on how big your invoice is, you can let them know that small claims court is something you are willing to do to get paid. Granted, if you do this, don't expect to work together again, and sometimes that's the better way of doing things. I find that whenever I have started to mention the possibility of small claims court, if it was a large company that I was expecting to get paid from, when I used to work for photographers that shot editorial and I would have to bill through a magazine, a lot of times I would get the runaround from accounting departments or accounts receivables, and they would say that the invoice got lost in the shuffle or it's got to go through some higher ups for approval. For a $250 invoice, a lot of times that doesn't need anybody's approval. They're just trying to milk you and use you as a credit service. And for those people, I would always say, well, I'm willing to take you to small claims court if this doesn't get resolved. In fact, I have even gone as far as hiring a lawyer and writing a boilerplate letter that I could send on my behalf, threatening to take him to court. I would almost always get that invoice resolved that same week. And sometimes you have to take drastic measures because promises of future work and good relationships don't pay your rent. And I think you have to remember that. And it's sometimes you have to play the bad guy in order to get the money that you need.
Hey, my name is Collette and I'm a photo assistant in San Francisco. I'm here to talk to you about holds. What is a hold? So a hold is exactly how it sounds. A hold is when a photographer, assuming you're an assistant, reaches out to you and says, "Hi, I've got a shoot coming up on this day. Are you available to assist me?" And you can either say, "No, I'm not available," or you can say, "Yes, I'm available." And they will usually get back to you and say, "That's great. Please hold." So what that means is don't book anything on that day, and don't make plans to do anything else. You're basically holding the date for that shoot. I should probably talk about the part where it gets a little complicated when another shoot wants to ask your availability on the date that you're already holding. Now you have the option to tell the new hold that you're already holding, and they can decide if they want to try to book you on that day. And they can say, "We'd like to challenge your first hold." And at that point, you can reach out to the photographer that first put you on hold, and you say, "I'm getting a challenge." And now it's up to that photographer or production to make a decision about you and confirm you within the next 24 hours. And if they don't get back to you, then you automatically can take that second job. Always write down your holds in your calendar. The last thing you want is to get a call and your photographer is wondering where you are because you didn't show up to the day you're supposed to assist. If a shoot hasn't confirmed and it's getting really close up to the shoot and you've reached out and they keep saying, "Please hold, please hold, please hold," don't believe that it's released and go plan something else, because I've had shoots confirm like literally the day before the actual shoot. Another thing I wanted to touch on was when the scheduling gets even more complicated with your conflicts. Say, for instance, you are holding for a one-day job, and then you get approached about a multi-day job, a travel job, maybe even to shoot your own project. Now you're in this dilemma of what to do. You're already holding for something. The best policy is if the other job is trying to confirm you, like you know that you're supposed to go to the first one and give them a challenge. But what if you'd rather do the second job, whether it's for your career interests, financial interests? The best policy, I think, is always to just have an honest conversation about the situation. Ideally, the photographer will want to see you grow financially, professionally, and will appreciate your honesty and be able to make it work on their shoot without you as an assistant. Another thing Jake pointed out to me, which I think is a really great photographer's perspective, is that it's always really kind and appreciated to try to line up a replacement that is the same level of experience as you and is available. So the scheduling conflicts are definitely stressful. You definitely have to navigate the communication, and communicating early is always key. It shows that you respect the photographer's interest in you and you respect their schedule and their needs. And I think that's kind of all I have to say about what a hold is. I kind of covered hold conflicts as well. And I hope that answers all your questions about holds. It's been really fun.
All right, so we have now talked about certain types of grip equipment like stands and clamps are the other thing. Now I'm surrounded by a bunch of, I guess what I would call diffusion or bounce. I'm gonna let my friend Kyle eventually talk about the qualities of light and texture and things like that, but there's all sorts of ways you can kind of handle light. You can, if you have a source of light, like say the sun or a strobe, there's all sorts of diffusion you can put between the strobe, let's say, and your subject or your product to kind of minimize or kind of disperse how direct it is, kind of like clouds are a diffusion of the sun, which is how it kind of tempers everything out. So I'm going to talk about some diffusion I have, as well as some things to straight up block whatever your light is. And then I'm also going to talk about things like this V-flat, which you can use to not only kind of block off light, but you can also kind of bounce light back. I'm trying to think of an example. Maybe like when you see those people with the sun tanning in Florida with those huge reflective things. There's all sorts of ways you can approach light. So light is never really a constant. You never have to just deal with light. You can tone it down as it comes towards your subject. You can also kind of amp it back up or kind of shut it off if you want. So just think of light as this kind of almost like water. Like there's all sorts of ways you can kind of handle it. So to my left, your right, I have a couple different things. I'm just going to kind of go through them. Bear with me. So these little guys here, these, as you can now maybe apply to the stands, these attach often to either the top of a stand via a knuckle, or you can also handhold them as well. These are 3 different types of diffusion I have. I'm going to get a little closer. So as you can see, these already, there's a huge light right next to me here. It's a big window, which is out of frame. Even if I put these next to me, I fully block myself off, almost. These are the 3 most common types of diffusion you might see on set. This is called a silk. The silk just refers to the type of material it is. It offers like a pretty nice transparent, it doesn't fully kill the light, it just kind of mutes it a little bit. Silks can come in all sorts of different forms. I think this is a 2x3 or so, that's what it looks like. For reference, this is about the size. Silks can come on huge frames. They can be 12 by 12 feet big. They can be even smaller than this, but when someone asks for a silk, it's kind of a roughly, kind of a transparent, gentle fabric. It's a little bit fragile, so treat it carefully, but that's what a silk looks like in general. I love to use silks as a way to kind of mute some sunlight, like I'm doing right here. It's a really beautiful, soft light that gets produced when you shoot through it. Next, I have what are called nets. I'm going to put these here. There are 2 kinds of nets that I have. This red one I'm holding is a double net. This green one is called a single net. You can also overlay nets if you need something a little bit bigger than what you have. Netting, honestly, I don't use a lot. I think a lot of product photographers do. It tends to, I'm not going to talk badly about nets. I don't really like them a lot, but if someone asks for a net, a double, you can kind of tell it's just thicker than the single. So if someone says, hey, could you get a double net, get this one. If someone says get a single net, get this one. All right, next. Say I love apple boxes, the best thing ever. Okay, more, I guess you can call this diffusion. It's not really. This is called a solid. It fully blocks light. It's incredibly absorbent of light. It's kind of got a soft kind of felt fabric. The 2 sides differ a little bit. This kind of softer side, just think of it as a way to just absorb light. If I put it next to me here, it basically fully blocks me. The closer you have it to a subject, the more light it'll block. The further away, you can also kind of really control it. There's not perhaps like any sort of perfect way to put a solid. It's just really about what you want. You can also put it on this side, and you can see it kills the amount of light I have on the side of my face not getting the window light. I'm going to talk about fill and shadow in a second, so bear with me. The last 2 things, you know what? I'm just going to briefly talk about this. This is off topic. This is called cinefoil. It's like a really heavy-duty aluminum foil. You can kind of wrap it endlessly. It's just a great little thing I grabbed, so if someone asks for cinefoil, this is what it looks like. It's a great way, just if you need to control things like spur of the moment, it's a great way to kind of maybe wrap a light if you're getting all sorts of spill into an area you don't want. Cinefoil is great. The last thing is called show card, which looks like this. You can have it in any sort of size. I've seen show cards this big. I've seen them really, really massive. Usually they're double-sided, so there's like a silver side and a white side. You can also have gold. It's crazy how much light you can pick up. Again, there's a window right over there. So yeah, show card's great if you need a really, really strong highlight like that. You can also, it's just a good like little thing in a pinch if you need a little bit of extra oomph on something. The last item I'll talk about, actually that's not true, there's a lot more coming, is called a 4x4 floppy. It's really big. I'm 6 foot tall, it's that big. It's called a floppy. Sorry, I gotta keep flashing there. It's called a floppy because it's got this Velcro kind of additional bit, and you can make it 8 feet tall. So it's a really, really amazing way to just double the source. You can do all sorts of different things. You can put it this way. If you have a subject you really want in, say you're really in a super sunny area, you can put a floppy over someone and just completely make them dark. There's all sorts of things you can do. Also, digital techs love these because, as you can see, it gives kind of a bit of a respite from not only their laptop, but themselves as well. So 4x4 floppies are awesome, and I highly recommend them. If you're gonna rig them, there's a little rigging post right there. So that's a 4x4 floppy. It's got Velcro, so it kind of already just self-fastened itself. This is called beadboard. Actually, this is great. You can see you. It mounts to a stand via this little guy here. So you would usually have it this way. It's got a hinge as well with a little clamp, so I'm doing this upside down, but basically you can really manage it this way. Beadboard comes in a couple different types of textures. This one is, I'm in, again, Flash Studio, very nice studio. It's kind of more product photography based. Usually the stuff you'll see on set is a lot more beat up than this. There's a couple different types of board. There's beadboard, which is kind of a little bit more textured. It doesn't have quite this pop to things. This, you can see if I sit down. It's actually not crazy shiny, pretty shiny. So there's beadboard, which is really textured. There's shiny board, which is kind of more what this is. It's literally quite shiny. And the other kind of third variation you'll see, these are all 4x4 feet, 4x feet, is called a mirror. So mirror is really, really, really intense. It's a great way if you have sun outside, you want to kick it kind of like into a room or something that has no light. Mirror is awesome. All right, so the last thing I'm going to talk about is a V-flat, but I'm going to take a break. All right, so we're 13% through light, how to talk about light. As I was kind of putting this together, I realized that this thing behind me, which is called a V-flat, is a really, really great way to understand just how you can control light in all sorts of different ways. So right over here, all this light you see kind of on this side of my face, less so on this side, is coming through a window that's like 6 by 6 feet or so. A V-flat is a huge piece of foam core. It's 4 feet by 8 feet. It's usually taped together like so. So on one side you have white, and on the other side you have black. I feel like Vanna White here. V-flats are almost never used on location. They're really, really hard to fit in any sort of vehicle, but they're super, super helpful in studio. But they're a really great way to kind of understand this concept of the light that you have coming onto a subject and then how you can control it on the opposite side. So this side of my face, the face that's not getting hit by window light, is called, it's all sorts of different things. It's, could use a shave for one thing, but basically you can control not only the amount of light spilling onto someone, but what's happening on the non-light side, essentially. So with this V-flat, I'm just gonna show you guys, I can control the amount of light, kind of, sort of, that's happening on this side. If you need more kind of shadow on the non-lit side of someone, it's called negative fill. If you bring this in, it's called negative fill. So if someone says, bring in negative fill to make a deeper shadow, you can do it with a V-flat. You can do extra negative fill this way. Again, you're gonna have someone, this will be in your background now. You can also use a solid for negative fill, but there's all sorts of different options you can do. But you can see on this side of my face, just even bringing in something as small as this will do to control the light. So if you wanna really say dramatic photo with a lot of kind of no shadow detail, negative fill is probably what you want. And there's a number of different ways you can get it with different tools. If someone wants more fill, you can, I have this little piece of show card. You can use the white side of a V-flat, you can use the show card, you can use a bed sheet, you can use a mirror, all sorts of different things. But there's a way to get basically more fill on someone this way. But V-flats are a phenomenal way to either add or subtract light. So now you can see I'm in total darkness. The second I come out, I'm in total light. So just think about light again as this kind of textured water that you can do whatever you want with. You don't necessarily have to work with what you're given if you don't quite like it. There's all sorts of different ways you can do it in studio. You can, again, if you're at your house, you can use bed sheets, bathroom mirrors, black cloth towels, all sorts of different things to kind of control how you use light and how much light you want on the highlighted side of someone's face and the shadow side of someone's face. All right, so now that we have talked a little bit about grip, some diffusion stuff, just a quick application. So if someone says, hey, we need a little bit of negative fill on this side of my face because you just want more of a deeper shadow. Someone's like, can you get a solid? You can go and grab something like this, but now you got to figure out how to attach it to your stand. And if you're doing this for the first time, it's a little bit daunting. So here's my stand. I'm going to come in a little bit, but just need to do the full length here. This is the stand. I guess I'll just do this now. I just really want to give Flash one more shout out, I guess. So I have my stand. I need to figure out how to attach this to here. There's no way to do it. There's nothing connecting whatsoever. However, on this side, I have two options. I have this knuckle. This knuckle is basically the thing that's holding the arm, so I can't really use that. That won't really help. However, on this side, I guess this is the end of an arm. I've never really thought about it that much. But I have these little mounting points here to put the solid in. So what I'm gonna do, I guess I'll do it this way so you guys can see it. And again, all this stuff moves. It's all incredibly kind of flexible and modular. So I'm gonna lock this off. I kind of habitually just make sure everything's tight all the time. You don't want things kind of spinning around. It's like the worst nightmare to look over and see a very expensive light about to fall on the ground. So now I have basically, I'm gonna say the end of my arm and this, and all of a sudden now I have a great way to attach my solid to my stand. So I'm gonna open this up. I'm not sure if you guys can see it. Get some more light. There's these couple different different size holes. This is for like a bigger one, like nothing's coming to mind. You want the slightly smaller one. And now you can put this in. Of course, it doesn't quite go. Again, this will all come with time. Don't feel like you have to be like a total pro at this the first time. It's fine to kind of fumble around. And you know what? Speaking of fumbling around, this hole's too big. This isn't even working. So let me just find another one. All right, I got another one here. There's like so many different choices here. Sometimes it's, I've done this a very long time. I just messed up, and that's fine. So you're just gonna slide that in, tighten it, and now you have your solid rigged up. If you need it, say, on this side of my face, either, if the subject's not moving, you can do this. Now, especially, know that you can kind of tweak things a bit, like nothing's locked in place. Even though everything's tight on the arm and the stand, you still have some flexibility, and from here you can kind of really finesse how you want things to look. So again, make sure you have a C-stand on here. Make sure that the arm is going to self-tighten. This isn't as big of a deal because there's nothing that heavy on here, but just in general, just good habit to have. So the last thing I'll talk about in terms of diffusion is a step up from these kind of smaller 2x3. This is a China silk. At a certain point, if you need something really big, like to cover a big, huge, say you're shooting a portrait with like 3 people, this won't have enough coverage for 3 people, like whatsoever. You need something really, really huge. So after these little guys, you go up to a system of things called frames, as well as, usually they're called silks. A frame usually comes in, let's see, 6x6, 8x8, 12x12. I'm just gonna stop there. You can get up to 20x20, but that's like pretty advanced. It becomes like a huge sail in the wind. So I'm not gonna set up any frames because it's more the idea. This is gonna be very loud. I think this is a 6x6 frame. It looks basically, it's like putting together something, telescoping. So all these things go in. You end up with a huge, in this case, a 6x6 frame. Then you have all sorts of different choices for what you fill the frame with. So you can put in something like this silk, which I showed you here. You can put in a big solid, and it's basically a way to get a larger amount of coverage for either diffusion, if you have a light source and you need to kind of tame it a little bit, or even like some negative fill, like a huge black solid piece of fabric. So if you hear a frame, an 8x8, a 6x6, a 12x12, the photographer or crew are referring to these things. They usually break down to something manageable, like this size. So you have to build them up. If you're with a crew, they're gonna, like the first or second assistant will show you how to do that. But if someone refers to a frame, they're talking about this. All right, so we've talked about all sorts of grip equipment at this point and diffusion in terms of how you can kind of control any sort of light coming towards, let's say, a subject, and this idea of fill and negative fill, and just how you kind of control both sides of whatever you're photographing. Now we're going to talk about strobes. It's a big, huge, perhaps even more complex topic than any sort of grip. Today, for this video, I'm just only focusing on strobe light as opposed to continuous light. But if you hear those 2 words being thrown around, someone is having a tantrum outside. If you hear those 2 words, strobe basically means any sort of quick flash type pop of light, whereas continuous light is constantly on. There's no strobe effect. It's just always going. So continuous light is really used primarily for, not even primarily, for video shoots. Video shoots can't use strobe. You just have these quick little pops of flash. So if you hear strobe and flash, those 2 words are synonymous, and it basically refers to any sort of flash unit like this. Just for ease, I'm going to talk about ProPhoto only. I feel like what I see more out there. I have no endorsement of ProPhoto versus the other company called Broncolor. Those are kind of the two main competitors. I'm going to talk about two different types of ProPhoto strobe. This is a battery-powered strobe, which means it does not need any sort of cords. It doesn't need to mount into a wall. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. This is, I would say, the most ubiquitous type of ProPhoto strobe you see, especially editorially, but even commercially. It's called the B1. This one I've had for like 5 years. It's awesome and a great workhorse. It has these separate little batteries to put the battery in. It has these little notches. You just slide it in and wait till you hear that click. Pretty simple. They've made it like as simple as you can get, basically. To turn it on, you hold this white button until it lights up. To control power, you can do it in whole increments, like 5 to 6 to 7, by pushing down and turning. If you want little kind of smaller increments, like 7.1, 0.3, 0.4, it's this way to do a test. And also, I guess, if you have a really bright strobe going and you want to do a test, if you see someone's working on a light, like putting something into it, don't flash them. It's kind of rude and really painful. So just say, hey, I'm gonna pop off a flash and it looks like this. You can do it as many times as you want. So that's what a ProPhoto looks like. To mount it into a stand, oh, these are getting a little creaky. It basically would go into an arm of a stand right here. I can show you that if I remember a little bit later. But this is what a ProPhoto B1 looks like. I'm going to talk about how you get it to pop in a minute, but that's what a battery-operated ProPhoto looks like. And then if you're in studio, wow, this is heavy. You have also all sorts of, I guess the not great thing about the B1s or anything battery-operated is it's kind of like an electric car, like you don't have quite as much power. Let's just leave it at that. You don't have as much range. You can't use it all day. You need to be on batteries. Compared to these hulks of units, you can plug into a wall. This is called an AC powered unit. This is another ProPhoto one. I think I knocked my lav mic. There we go. So yeah, I'm not gonna start to talk about different models, but if you hear an AC pack, it means it plugs into the wall. It has this little connector right here. So you have what's called a power pack, and then a head. This is a ProPhoto head. It has this little kind of protective dome, like so. This glass is really expensive and very fragile, so when being stored, you want to keep the dome on. And basically, this cord would plug into this pack. So I'm not gonna, just for ease, I'm gonna talk more about the B1s. All right, so have my camera, I have my strobe, but how do I get my strobe to fire with this camera? How do I get it to happen all at the same time? There are these things called transmitters. I feel like I'm doing a beauty product shot here. Transmitters. This company called Pocket Wizard basically runs the market. They're pretty great, they're pretty reliable. You're gonna need one, let's just keep it simple, one transmitter on your camera and then one on your strobe. So to put your transmitter on your camera, if you've ever wondered what this little thing is, it's called a hot shoe. It basically, every time your camera fires, it sends a signal out to the hot shoe saying like, go, basically. So you slide your transmitter on here and you kind of lock it in place like that. Now that's on there. And then you have to put one on your strobe as well. However, there's no hot shoe on your strobe itself. So what you have to do is you have to take a cord. In this case, a cord that looks like this. I have my hands full here. On the ProPhoto, you have, not ProPhoto, on the Pocket Wizard, you have a port here, and then a port on the bottom. So now you're all connected. So you have your Pocket Wizard talking to the Pocket Wizard on the camera. And lastly, if you ever want to feel really silly, if you're trying to figure out why your strobes aren't firing, it's probably because you haven't turned your Pocket Wizards on both camera and strobe. So now, you can't see it, but with this hand out of frame, I'm going to be hitting the test button on the Pocket Wizard, and that's what's making my strobe go off. If I had a card and battery in my camera, which I don't, I could do it with here, but you're just gonna have to trust me. This is how the system works. So camera to the Pocket Wizard, to this Pocket Wizard, to the strobe is how you make it talk. It's the exact same thing with the other Pro Photo Pack I showed, but that's what a strobe does, that's what a transmitter does. So hopefully that was. One quick thing I forgot to mention or talk about is there are all sorts of different types of ends on what are called sync cables. There's two that you mainly want to deal with when you have a Pocket Wizard. Like so, there's a little, it's called a mini jack. So this smaller side plugs in like that. This bigger side goes into the strobe pack when you're dealing with these huge kind of AC powered Pro Photos. For the smaller ones like B1s, it's just a mini to a mini, but for these, you plug it in this side. Again, make sure that it's on. You can tell, you can't really see in here, but if you kind of, it's not gonna work. There's a little, it kind of illuminates red. And then this bigger side goes into your Pro Photo Pack right here, where it says sync, upside down, perfect, plugs in like so. That's how you make that happen. It's helpful. All right, things got a little closer because I wanted to talk about light meters. I feel like this is a relic. I feel like people never use these anymore. They're incredibly important. I feel like this is one of the best kind of tools to help understand light in general. This is a really kind of busted but decent model that I've had in my camera bag for probably a decade or something like that. There's a plane flying overhead if you're wondering what that background noise is. I'm next to SFO. I'm just gonna give you a breakdown. So what is a light meter? It's kind of what it sounds like. It's a tool that measures the amount of light that's kind of hitting this little sensor inside. If you everything has a light meter. Anything that takes a photo has a light meter. Your iPhone has a light meter. Probably your camera has a light meter if it's like made after like 1982. It's the tool, it's the sensor that gauges what your shutter and aperture setting should be. I'm gonna assume you kind of know what shutter and aperture are. But these are incredibly helpful. It helps give just a much more kind of fundamental understanding of how light works in general. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. I'm not working with anyone, so. All right, so it has a couple different settings. This will be really hard for me to do. There we go. So I don't know if you can see it. There we go. There's this kind of, in the upper left-hand corner, you have what looks like there's a sun, there's a little flash, and there's a flash with a C. The sun is just for ambient light reading. The little flash with no C is for a strobe where you pop the strobe, and once you pop the strobe, it basically is in this receptive mode, and once you pop the strobe, it tells you what your meter reading should be. And then the last one, which is the flash with the C, refers to chord, which means that I've actually never used it. Right down here, there's this little tiny, you can plug your light, your Pocket Wizard, whatever, into there, and you can basically pop the flash and get the reading that way. Think of this as like your, I don't know, a thermometer if you've, actually that's not even a great one. It just tells you what your reading should be. I'm gonna try to not get too into detail about this, but basically this is going to tell you what your average middle gray reading should be. It's going to take all these different tones, your brightest bright to your darkest dark, and then tell you exactly what that middle point should be. It's exactly what your iPhone does, your DSLR does all the time. However, you can that's an interpretation. You can kind of take that reading and then decide what you want to do with it, like what you want to say. If you want, say it's a really moody day, your camera or your light meter is going to try to be like, well, it's really dark, so here's the middle gray between your brightest bright, which is not that great, and your darkest dark, and it's going to give you an exposure that's kind of brighter than what your eye's seeing and maybe what you're like feeling in your heart. You can also have the other opposite, where you have an incredibly bright sunny day. It's going to give you that middle reading, and it's maybe it's too dark. It's kind of, you want it to feel very hot and kind of like even almost sweaty. You want it to feel bright and kind of squinty. So whatever your meter reading is giving you, know that that's not exactly what you need to follow. You can interpret that how you wish. I personally love to kind of go under my meter reading a little bit and get a bit of a darker tone, but just remember that this is a tool, but this is not like the script by which you need to follow. That all being said, thank you for following my monologue here. I'm gonna go to the ambient mode, which you do by, every meter is different, but basically I'm hitting the mode button and going over. So now I'm at 500th of a second, if you can see that. I have this little, it's all backwards. I have this little thumb button, and if I click that, that's gonna tell me every time I hit this little side button, it tells me what my meter reading should be. So right now, you know what, it's too dark. I'm gonna bring my ISO up. I also won't talk too much about that. So in this room right now, if I hit this button, my ambient reading is 2/50th at f4. So that means at ISO 800, my average gray is 250th of a second at f4. However, I can I can shoot at f5.6 and get something a little darker. I can shoot at f2.8 and get something brighter. But that's what the ambient mode does. And I'm just gonna go to the flash mode now. So now, I don't know if you can see that. Very difficult. I'm on autofocus. So now you'll notice that it says 0 because it's basically waiting for me to have a strobe take effect. So I have my pocket wizard here. What you have to do is you have to kind of prime the light meter. So you're gonna hit it with your thumb, like so. And then once you hit this with your strobe, it's gonna say, that's weird, it didn't go. It was upside down. Okay, one more time. So it just kind of primed, it's at 0 right now, and then watch, the second I hit my strobe, it's gonna give me a reading. So it's saying 2/50th at 11/4. The smaller thing, so it's f11 and then it's in tenths, so it's 4/10 between f11 and f16, if that makes any sense. But if you're wondering what that little number is, it's kind of the halfway point. So it's like halfway between f11 and f16. If this makes no sense, it'll maybe make sense later. I'm not really sure. But basically, that's how you get a light meter reading with a strobe. You can constantly do this. I can also, say if I back off a little bit to like here, I'm gonna guess I'm gonna hit just 11 flat now. What'd I get? Okay, no, the same. I'm not bad, I'm still figuring my stuff out. That's how a light meter works. Okay, so now we have this is a little weird. Most of the pro photos, pocket wizards will have this little tether. This is not my favorite system, I don't love it. I don't really know of a better one. I'm sure there is one. If you work with someone that has it, that's awesome. I would love to know. So now we have the pocket wizards connected, everything's going. If I hit test, it flashes, which is great. Everything is set here, it's turned on. And again, to put a strobe on, this little guy is going to go on a stand. So I have 2 stands behind me here. And I wanted to show you 2 different configurations. So I have on your right, my left, a C-stand. You have 2 different options of how you can mount it. I think this is in the frame. There we go. So you can either mount it straight to the arm on the top, like so. Make sure that this little threaded thing, I don't know, I'm drawing a blank, clamp, not even a clamp. Make sure this threaded thing is clear. You can look straight down kind of the barrel, make sure it's not impeding. So you can fully seat the B1 or strobe head on here. And then you can tighten it from there, and then you can check it after that. If you don't have it fully threaded, but you think you have space, you'll put it on, it kind of looks like it's gonna go, but it's really janky. So make sure that you can optically see it going all the way down, like so, and you should be good. Again, it's always great to kind of check your work, make sure everything's stable and secure. These things are not cheap, and if they fall, it's not ideal. The other option you have is you can take off the arm. I'm just gonna put this down and just mount your strobe of any sort. It could be a B1, it could be a light off a power pack straight to the same deal. Again, look how I kind of checked. Make sure that I'm fully bottomed out, tighten it. Same deal, ready to go. If you need to make any adjustments, I can either, say that like turn this, I can undo this and turn the strobe off independently of the strobe. I can also use either of these to spin this around like so. But again, just always make sure to tighten. Last little option is if you have, say, a riser stand, and this is down, you just pull it up, lock it off, and then put it on top. Make sure you're good to go. And that's how you have any sort of strobe head mounted onto a stand. For ease, I'm just gonna keep it on this riser because it has wheels.
Hey all, how's it going? My name is Mark. Just thought this would be a really great opportunity to, record and show a progress of, I don't know if it's in the life of an assistant, but I'm basically putting equipment together for a prep day, which is today, and I picked up a bunch of gear. Guess I can't flip the screen, but this is a combination of my gear and some gear from Sammy's camera. And the shoot is tomorrow. And so basically what I'm doing a lot of times on larger photo shoots, there can be a prep day or a pickup day. And a lot of times that requires, say like myself, an assistant / photographer, artist, what have you, many labels, but in this case, assistant or grip, that I pick up equipment from the rental space and I also deliver it. Now, sometimes you'll have a grip van that you'll pick up, but many times on, medium, kind of higher ender shoots, especially if you have transportation like myself. I have a minivan, which is beneficial for yourself for your own shoots, but also for other people's shoots and even smaller editorial stuff, that you can carry gear, which is very helpful. And you can also pick up people, more so the photographer, and you can transport stuff, which is pretty awesome because there's a lot of stuff required in photo shoots. Right now, basically in those shoots, you're going to be picking up a lot of equipment. Right here, I have some C stands, 48 inches. They're all kind of like taken apart. And this is a little bit sloppy right now because I'm consolidating, and also I was shooting myself at another time period. But basically, I'm consolidating everything and organizing everything for the shoot for tomorrow's shoot. So everything runs smoothly. I'm testing out the strobes beforehand. That might seem a little excessive. Those strobes are mine, so I just want to make sure they're working condition for tomorrow. Most likely at the rental shops, they are tested, although I would do that myself. I used to work at a rental shop for about, close to 5 years, more off and on. So it behooves you to test the equipment and make sure they're functioning correctly, because the last thing you would want is on the shoot that something goes wrong. It's like when you go on a shoot and you have one battery and it goes dead, and now you're stranded without being able to use any equipment. So basically I have this like this bag right here that I'm consolidating everything, and I actually just picked up these milk crates. This is, sorry, a little overkill, but I found a deal on Craigslist, and I also want to use it for my own purposes right there, which are these milk crates. I believe they're 12 inches by 18 inches. I got 6 of these. I scored a deal. I think they usually go for like 25, but anyways, not talking about price. We're talking about equipment and gear, and how to better yourself to be well organized, because essentially as an assistant, you want this for yourself. You want to be organized, and you want to be efficient, and you want to get the shot. And so in the same way as you would want as yourself as a photographer, you would want the person you're working with to do the same, because you guys are a team, you're working together. So when I feel good about, putting all this stuff together in a more organized fashion, hopefully in the next 30 minutes or hour, it will make things so much smoother. And also you can account for it when you also put it back, and even when you do returns. One tip, there's a lot of things actually to touch on, but that's just kind of like a quick because there's so many things here. If you do end up renting your equipment, I actually didn't start out with anything except for like maybe my D80 camera that I used to take at band shows, and that's all I could show up with, and just kind of like prancing around with equipment that we never used on a few shoots, and hoping that we were going to at least use one, as being not as knowledgeable. But if when you do end up having and decide that you want to get more grip equipment, like for instance, C-stands. So we have C-stands here at my studio that I share with 3 other people, and sharing is great. Jake definitely brought that up at one point. I remember he mentioned, share all your things. So if you do have equipment and your friend needs gear, it's a great, you don't have to spend the money. If you have something, you can share something with them. It's a great way to I don't want to use the word networking, but it's just a good way to have that friendship, and also just be like, hey, I got your back, you got mine, we're in this together. Again, teamwork, very, very important, especially when you're working on shoots like this. So again, going back, sorry, I digress a little bit, but with these stands, I'm marking with this pink gaff tape. And the reason why is because I want to differentiate the difference between mine and theirs. And that seems very simple, but I forget it all the time. And then I'm like, oh yeah, now I'm at the rental house, like, is it mine or is it theirs? And then I end up going back home and I'm like, oh great, I got the messed up one that I didn't account for, and now I'm stuck, or because that C-stand is potentially like lost with all the 100 C-stands that are in the rental house. But yeah, I thought that was really important to share. Again, like, to sum it up, organize, very important. Share your things with people that are working in the same, place, mindset as you. It definitely benefits you on these shoots, benefits them. I think that it's definitely has helped me and also built tighter friendships and also that clear communication and trust. Yeah, I think that's about it. But I'm gonna continue packing this stuff because we have a really early shoot. Be organized, be prepared. I also have a printout of the list of things. Again, maybe a little overboard, but I just want to make sure to count and itemize all the things that I have. So when the shoot comes, it's not going to look like all an explosion went off. So yeah, happy shooting, happy assisting, and really stoked for this video. And if you guys need any other tips or any questions on things, I'm happy to share them. Peace.
All right, so now, if you're still watching, I'm going to talk about 3 different types of modifiers, kind of in general terms and also specific terms that you might see on set and also that you'll probably like to use at some point yourself. The 3 are this, which is called a 7-inch reflector, which is because it's 7 inches wide. To your left is what's called an octabank, like so. And then to your right is a softbox. The 7-inch reflector, and I guess just to briefly touch upon size, God, there's so much to talk about. So we have so much to talk about, guys. The smaller your source, the harder your light will be. By the smaller your source, I mean literally how big or tiny it is. The larger your source, like say the size of this little guy versus this huge thing, small source, big source. Really easy way to remember this is just think of the sun and think of the clouds. The sun is this, I mean, it's really big, but in terms of what we see, it's really small. If you think of a hot kind of cloudless day, excuse me. If you think of a hot kind of cloudless day, you think of what you see on the shadows from the sun from your body down to the street. Think of buildings, those really hard defined lines. That's what you get with a really small source. But on a really kind of cloudy day, the sun is diffused. If you remember our diffusion talk, the sun is diffused through a huge massive layer of cloud, and it basically catches the brightness and intensity of the sun and then spreads it out and kind of literally diffuses it to a point where you might not even be able to see your shadow because the light is so kind of spread out, if that makes any sense. So if you ever kind of get tripped up in terms of thinking about light in studio or in strobe, it's really easy to just think back to even what might, if you're outside, like what the sun is doing that very moment. If it's really bright and hot, just think of a really small source. You're gonna have really hard shadows. You're gonna have like a lot of kind of highlights. Things are gonna be kind of very contrasty looking. If it's a really cloudy day and you want something a little softer, a little bit more broad, a little bit more spread, less defined shadows, you want a bigger source. So with a 7-inch reflector, this is a very common kind of way to somewhat mimic the sun. It's gonna be really direct light. I have nothing between maybe my strobe and here. This reflector basically attaches, it just looks like this. It attaches to any, again, we're talking about pro photo, it slides on, and then there's this collar there. I'm doing a great job staying behind the light. This, you can zoom it. I'm not gonna really talk about that too much, but basically what this reflector is doing is collecting this light and then like pushing it forward and sending all this light collectively to whatever you're shooting. If I took this off, you can totally shoot that way as well, but all of a sudden my light's gonna be going like backwards. Anywhere that you can see this little dome, the light's gonna go. So the only place the light is gonna miss is like directly behind. So what this does, this 7-inch reflector, or just a reflector in general, is kind of gathers and focuses the light forward. So now that I have that, I'm going to move on to a softbox. So this is a softbox. It's soft and it's a box, so that's why it's called a softbox. This is a great way in terms of if you've never seen one before, the type of light it puts out is exactly like this really nice soft window light that's next to me to your right. It basically is collecting the light put out by this strobe, and instead of like really, finessing it into one spot, it's getting shot through this one big, nice soft silk. It's in terms of like what you maybe would have seen this before in terms of ambient light, it's really similar to if you put a really kind of thin curtain across a window and you get that really nice soft glow. It doesn't mean that the light is necessarily that much darker, it just kind of chills everything out and makes it really soft. To put a softbox on, it's the same exact system. There's this kind of rubber collar with this little snappy. So what you do is you just attach it. Again, when you put any sort of modifier on, this is a modifier, these are all light modifiers. You just make sure you're really careful in clearing the dome. You kind of have to sometimes wiggle it a little bit and wrestle it, and that's how you have that. And now you have a softbox on your light. It looks like that. Look how cute that is. It's great. Okay, I'm gonna take this off very carefully. Sometimes, if my stand doesn't have wheels or does have wheels, so I guess just sometimes, you kind of really have to use both hands and do that. If anyone's making you rush, don't rush around strobes or expensive equipment. Maybe you rush to like get water or something like that. Okay. The last modifier I'm going to talk about is called an octabank. This is personally my favorite. It's kind of a mix between, you can kind of already tell, it's a mix between the 7-inch reflector and this. If you are confused as to how this might work, it basically attaches the same exact way. And what I love about an octabank we'll see if I edit this. You can tell it's exactly like the way a satellite, instead of kind of a satellite collecting information like out of the sky, an octabank or any sort of piece of equipment like modifier like this, it kind of harnesses it and it shoots it not with the intensity of the 7-inch reflector, but not quite with the calmness of the softbox. It kind of focuses the light, but you can have diffusion on it. And again, I'll just put some diffusion. So you can use it in different ways. If you want a super hard source, you can use this octa this way, and it basically becomes a pretty focused but broad source. You can also put diffusion on. I'm going to do it down and dirty. So if someone says, hey, can you put a baffle, an outer baffle on here? That's what it looks like. So you have, with the octabank here, you have this kind of somewhat targeted focus light, very similar to a softbox, but also it gives a little bit more definition to shadows. It kind of mimics the sun, it mimics like natural light pretty well. So that's why I personally like it. You can also, if you want, I won't do it, but you can double up baffles and put one on the inside here and then put one on the outside. So you have all sorts of options. I can also just do the inside only and not the outside. It all just depends on what you want. The more diffusion you have, think about it as like a really thick cloud cover, the softer your source will get. Also, the more powerful your light will need to go, because this will kind of kill some of the light that's attempting to blast out. To set up a octabank, it's probably the hardest of all the different things you may need to deal with in a day, maybe. you know, again, Apple boxes, they're just great. I find the older these are, the more kind of beat up they are, the harder they are to get going. It's pretty simple though. Basically, all these little green guys match to all these little green circles you see. What I like to do is just go opposite. So match just green to green. And then also, I think it's very helpful to go, let's see, I'm already botching it. Start by going like, it's inelegant, I will tell you that. Just go like opposite to opposite and then do the same thing on this side. So it's a little bit like cutting a pie. Just think about it as cutting a pie and you're good. And then after you get the 4, it's a lot easier to do the last ones. The first one is probably always the hardest. All right. So now, this is all opposite here. Octabank is pretty much ready. The last thing is just to attach all this Velcro. And that basically makes sure you don't have light spilling out the backside. And that is how you have an octabank. And then your light will go through there. I guess one last thing I didn't talk about is diffusion. There's 2 different types in here. So on octabanks, they're called, I'm gonna sit down again. On octabanks, this is what they look like. Diffusion, we'll see if I edit that out. Diffusion basically is, with octabanks, they're called baffles. On these, you have an inner baffle, which I'm not sure if you can see this. It's the white part, and then you have an outer. You have 2 baffles that you'll see. One is smaller than the other. The smaller one is the inner, and the bigger is the outer. They basically attach, it's actually already attaching. It attaches via Velcro, and then the outer one would attach on this outer strip of Velcro right here. Okay, one thing I forgot to mention in terms of these 7-inch reflectors, there are all sorts of modifications. Take 2. One thing I forgot to mention in terms of these 7-inch reflectors, they often are used in conjunction, not always, but sometimes, with what are called grids. These are grids. Grids basically help control the amount of light, how much light is spreading. If you imagine that my hand is the strobe, and I'm not dropping grids, my hand's the strobe, at a certain point you can see my hand. And so where you can see my hand basically is where the amount of spill your light will have. So what if you don't want that much spill? What if you're really trying to like dial the light in on one thing? You can control it with different like flags I showed earlier, or those solids. However, what I love to use and what you might see often are these things called grids. So grids are kind of honeycomb adapters that really only work with this. Actually, that's not true. They work with everything. If you hear a grid, it basically refers to a way to control how much light will spread. The tighter the grid, as you can see if you try to find my face, basically the more restricted and tight the amount of light you have will project, let's say. So the looser grid, again, just like pretend my face is a beautiful strobe light. Looser grid gives you, you can see my face for longer. This one, it doesn't take much before it's gone, which is what you guys all want. So to put a grid in, really simple. This only will work with a 7-inch reflector, nothing else. You basically take the grid and, sorry, I have to do this out of frame here. And you pop it in. And then again, if this is my light, you can see it doesn't take much. So that's the really, really tight grid. This is the 5 degree. If I jump to the 20 degree, you'll see you can see my light, aka the hand, for a much kind of greater angle. So grids are really great if you're really trying to project light into just one spot and kind of really control where your light is going. All right, I'm going to talk quietly about gels. Gels are used pretty frequently. There's a whole subtopic called color temperature, also referred to in terms of the unit as kelvins, the way we refer to degrees in the US, our beautiful, great country, in Fahrenheit. Kelvins refers to color temperature. If you worked in especially like Lightroom or any sort of editing, when you see that little thermometer, you can make things cooler or more kind of orangey yellow, essentially. Daylight, for example, I think is 5,500 Kelvin. The room I'm in, everything is daylight balanced. So if you hear daylight balanced, that means that the overhead lights or the lights that are kind of in, say, a studio are balanced to the same exact color temperature as outside. I won't really get too into the nitty-gritty, but basically if you have, say, 2 different color temperatures and you need them to match, you can either say this hand is the warmer color temperature, this hand is the cooler. You can either make the warmer cooler, like so, and they match and you're shooting in one color temperature, or you can make the cooler warmer. It's a little bit opposite of like what you would normally think. At least for me, I still kind of struggle with it ever so slightly sometimes. But you have these gels called CTO, which means color temperature orange, and CTB, which means color temperature blue. These come in a variety of different kind of intensities. This is like insanely, I don't even know if this is CTB. This might be like just a blue gel. You can have full CTB, 3/4, half, quarter, etc. And so the smaller the fraction, the more kind of opacity, the less blue it is. The same with this. So full CTO is like fiery orange. Usually on set, you'd see more of like a quarter or a half CTO. So say if I wanted to, I'm trying to think of an example. Say my overhead lights, if I'm trying to balance with this outdoor light, my overhead lights are a little bit cooler, like outdoors, let's say is 5,500 or so. The overhead lights might be closer to 4,200. So I'm trying to bring the 4,200 up to the 5,500. I'm trying to get the cool light to get brighter, not brighter, warmer. What I can do is take CTO, color temperature orange, and put gel over my light, or say a strobe, whatever, so that my color temperatures match. If you shoot in a way where color temperatures don't match, it's not the end of the world. Some people do it intentionally. You get kind of either a bright, like a warm highlight and a cool shadow, or you get a cool highlight and a warm shadow, depending on what light sources you have and also what you're ultimately kind of, if you're shooting digitally, are trying to set your color temperature at. But if you're trying to kind of make everything on one plane and you have imbalanced color temperatures on whatever lights you have going on, you're gonna need one of these 2 things. So one quick, just super simple, but medium simple potential scenario is if you need to put a strobe in a softbox on this stand here. Have the strobe, make sure it's powered on. Now it's powered on. Battery's in there because it powered, so really thinking through it here. Putting this strobe in the softbox. I love to do these with the softbox on the ground unless you're in like a really muddy environment. But you basically just very carefully push it through and kind of coax it the whole way, like so. Close this collar. And now the next step here, so this is a riser. I'm gonna do this so you can see it. Nope, you can't see it. There we go. This is what happens when you shoot during COVID. So basically, I'm going to put this pin out so my softbox has something to grab onto. Notice that it's clockwise, so it'll self-tighten. And honestly, you can put it in any way you want. I'm gonna totally block myself here. Put it in, make sure it's fully fastened. like so. Hopefully you guys can see me. Now I can arm it, like, let's just say this is what I want. I'm gonna back off a little bit. Again, I'm like kind of compulsively checking that all my, everything's tight so that nothing falls off. I might even just kind of wiggle this back and forth just a little bit and make sure I'm all good. Again, make sure it's clockwise. The other thing that Eric, who is the studio manager of, actually is the owner of Flash, wanted me to talk about is the idea of kind of counterweighting. So as you can see here, this is not super heavy. It could be way more heavy, but left to its own devices, it's still not the most stable. You can see it's kind of starting to tip a little bit. What you want to do in that case is, this is a great application of a super clamp. If you can see it. It's already on here, but I'm trying to reveal it. So this is a super clamp with a J-hook. If I were to start from scratch, hello. So super clamp J-hook, you need to push this pin down so it goes in. Once you do that, you tighten that, and now you're ready to put your super clamp on, like so. And basically from here, now you have this great application where you can hang weight. So I'm gonna take some of these sandbags, maybe just one, and hang them on here. And now, this actually might be overkill, but you have some counterbalance. So make sure that any light or stand or anything is stable, and if you have a lot of weight on one side, make sure you have counterbalance. Otherwise, at some point you look around and there's like this huge crash and like a very expensive light breaks and you feel pretty bad about it. Okay, quick little pep talk about direct versus indirect light. Again, these are, I can't quite stress enough. You know, it's heart to heart here. I can't stress enough. These are tool. I'm teaching you, if this were guitar, I'm teaching you chords. I'm not teaching you how to play guitar. I'm not teaching you how to make a song. These are the tools. You can interpret it however you want. I think some of the coolest, most kind of ingenuitive lighting comes from being really unorthodox with how you use tools. So don't think that if I'm showing you something in one way, it needs to be the way it is. I'm just literally saying, hey, here's like literally, if you're on set, how to put a reflector on a strobe or something like that. That said, I wanted to briefly touch upon, I'm going to tell you another thing, briefly touch upon this idea of kind of lighting directly versus indirectly. Directly is kind of what it sounds like. It's a light shining straight at a thing with maybe some diffusion in between it, but you're putting the light at a thing. However, kind of very much like pool, like in a pool hall, you can do all sorts of crazy banking. You don't need to, sometimes you take your cue and you bank against a bumper thing and then the ball goes in another way. And you can do that with light as well. You can just, honestly, I could set up a series of mirrors where the light just bounces and then it, finally hits something at the end, like a subject. So there's not only the, direct light where you're literally pointing the light at the camera, or not the camera, but a subject. You can also bounce light into anything. So right now I have my V-flat set up. If you can't tell, this is the V-flat. I know it's kind of blending into the wall. So what's cool about indirect light is you could bounce it off a floor. If I put my light into a V-flat, all of a sudden I go from a source that's 7 inches tall to a source that's 8 inches wide, or sorry, 8 feet tall and 8 feet wide. So it's a great way if you want a kind of a brighter spread of light, or basically a softer amount of light, or a light that, if you even look at me in here, kind of wraps and envelops a subject with a way softer shadow. You can put indirect light anywhere. You can put it into a ceiling, you can put it into a wall. Beware if you're putting it into a wall, like make sure that the wall is a color temperature you want bounced back. I wouldn't really recommend like into a acid green wall because you'll have crazy color casts. But basically just know that you don't need to necessarily point a light like right at your subject. You can also do what's called feathering, where it kind of reduces the intensity, where you're quite literally you're feathering. If someone says, hey, feather the light off the subject, it literally means instead of pointing it directly at them, just push it away. You'll kind of have a decision of which way you want to push it, but you do not ever need to, as a rule, have direct light all the time. Indirect light is phenomenal, and you can get really, really creative with what sources you're bouncing your light off of. You can put it through any number of different things, and you'll get really great kind of softer results that often are a little bit more elegant and kind of more real world than you might if you just have a light directly at a subject.